One person who could save your life? Have you ever judged someone by their job title, never knowing the incredible story beneath the surface? This billionaire CEO was about to learn the most humbling lesson of his life. And what happened next changed everything he thought he knew about success, respect, and the people around him. This is the story of Conrad Billings, a tech mogul worth over $3 billion, a man who built an empire from nothing and commanded respect in every boardroom he entered. Conrad lived by one simple rule. Results mattered more than relationships. He saw people as functions, not individuals. Your value was determined by your title, your salary, your position on the corporate ladder. For 3 years, Elon Grant drove Conrad to meetings, airport pickups, and business dinners. Always punctual, always professional, always quiet. Conrad appreciated efficiency above all else, and Elon delivered exactly that. No small talk, no personal stories, no complications. Just smooth rides and perfect timing. But here's what Conrad never bothered to discover. The man behind the wheel wasn't just another driver scraping by in America. Elon Grant had once saved lives in operating rooms across Lagos, Nigeria. He had performed emergency surgeries, diagnosed rare conditions, and earned the respect of colleagues who called him one of the finest physicians they'd ever known. Life had forced Elon to trade his stethoscope for a steering wheel, his medical degree for a chauffeur's license. Immigration paperwork, licensing complications, and the crushing weight of survival had pushed his dreams aside. Every morning, he put on his driver's uniform and swallowed his pride, focusing on one thing only: providing for his daughter Leora's education. Conrad never asked about Elon's past, never wondered about his accent, never questioned why his driver spoke with the precision of someone highly educated. To Conrad, Elon was simply part of the machinery that kept his life running smoothly, reliable, replaceable, unremarkable. If stories about hidden heroes and life-changing moments inspire you, hit that like button, because this one will leave you speechless. On one stormy Monday morning, everything would change. A high-stakes shareholder meeting awaited. Tensions were running high, and Conrad was already feeling the pressure mounting in his chest. He had no idea that within the next hour, his carefully ordered world would collapse completely. The man he'd never truly seen, never really known, would become the only thing standing between him and death. Sometimes the most extraordinary people hide in plain sight, performing ordinary jobs while carrying extraordinary gifts. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal who people really are beneath their uniforms, their circumstances, their silence. And sometimes the person you've never bothered to notice becomes the person who changes your life forever. Conrad Billings was about to discover that real power isn't about commanding respect. It's about recognizing the incredible human beings already in your presence. Every morning at exactly 6:47 a.m., Elon Grant adjusted his rear-view mirror, checked his watch, and prepared for another day of invisibility. The man Conrad saw was a careful construction: pressed uniform, polished shoes, respectful silence. But the real Elon Grant carried memories that would have shocked his employer to the core. 10 years earlier, Dr. Elon Grant had walked the halls of Lagos University Teaching Hospital with confidence earned through countless saved lives. His colleagues sought his opinion on complex cases. Medical students hung on his every word during rounds. Patients' families wept with gratitude when he delivered good news, and trusted him completely when the news was difficult. He had specialized in emergency medicine, thriving in those crucial moments when seconds determine whether someone lives or dies. His hands were steady under pressure, his mind sharp when chaos erupted around him. Other doctors called him the calm, never flustered, never overwhelmed, always finding solutions when situations seemed hopeless. But America had different plans for Dr. Elon Grant. The immigration process stripped away his identity piece by piece. His Nigerian medical degree needed validation. His years of experience required recertification. His expertise meant nothing without American credentials. While he navigated the maze of paperwork, licensing exams, and bureaucratic delays, his savings dwindled and his daughter Leora needed food, clothing, and school supplies. Pride is a luxury poor people can't afford. Elon took the first job that offered steady income, cleaning office buildings at night. Then he drove for a delivery company. Finally, through a staffing agency that specialized in discreet domestic services, for high-net-worth individuals. He landed a position with Conrad Billings. Conrad had been specific in his requirements: punctual, professional, invisible. No chattering, no personal stories, no complications. Just reliable transportation from point A to point B. Elin was perfect for the role, educated enough to handle complex schedules, desperate enough to accept the boundaries, and skilled enough to anticipate needs before they were spoken. What Conrad didn't know was that every day, Elin fought an internal battle. When Conrad complained of headaches, Elin mentally ran through differential diagnoses. When his employer popped antacids like candy, Elin noticed the signs of chronic stress and poor cardiovascular health. When Conrad's breathing became labored after climbing stairs, Elin saw symptoms that demanded medical attention. But speaking up wasn't his job. His job was to drive, wait, and stay quiet. Leora was the reason Elin swallowed every medical opinion that rose in his throat. His 16-year-old daughter was brilliant, honors student, debate team captain, already accepted to 3 universities with partial scholarships. She needed the rest of her tuition paid, needed stability, needed her father to keep this job no matter how much it cost his soul. Every evening, Elin would return to their small apartment and help Leora with chemistry homework, explaining molecular structures with the same precision he once used to teach medical students. She would tell him about her day, her dreams of becoming a biomedical engineer, her plans to make him proud. Those moments reminded him why he'd sacrificed everything. "Papa," she would say, "someday I'll make enough money so you can go back to being a doctor." Elin would smile and tell her he was exactly where he needed to be. But late at night, alone in his room, he would hold his old stethoscope, the one piece of his former life he couldn't bear to sell. He would close his eyes and remember the weight of responsibility that came with healing, the satisfaction of diagnosis, the profound purpose that had once defined his existence. Conrad valued Elin's reliability without ever wondering about the source of that calm competence. He appreciated punctuality without considering the discipline required to maintain it. He benefited from Elin's anticipation of needs without recognizing the intelligence behind those insights. Can you understand having incredible skills but no opportunity to use them? Drop a comment if you've ever felt undervalued or overlooked, because Elin's story is about to prove that hidden talents have a way of revealing themselves when they're needed most. The irony was almost unbearable. Conrad surrounded himself with advisors, consultants, and specialists, paying thousands of dollars for expertise he could have accessed simply by asking his driver a question. But men like Conrad don't ask drivers for opinions. They don't see employees as complete human beings with complex histories and valuable knowledge. To Conrad, Elin was scenery, reliable, pleasant, forgettable scenery that got him from meeting to meeting without complications. He never noticed that Elin read medical journals on his breaks, never saw him studying for American medical licensing exams during downtime, never realized that the man behind the wheel possessed knowledge that could one day save his life. For 3 years, they maintained this professional distance. Conrad in the back seat, managing his empire through phone calls and emails. Elin in the front seat, managing routes and schedules while his medical mind remained locked away and used and unrecognized. Neither man knew that everything was about to change, that a stormy Monday morning would shatter their carefully maintained boundaries and reveal truths that would transform both their lives forever. Monday, March 15th, started like any other day, but the atmosphere felt charged with tension from the moment Conrad slid into the back seat of his Mercedes. The quarterly shareholder meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., and 3 months of disappointing earnings had put Conrad's leadership under intense scrutiny. Downtown Financial District. Conrad barked without looking up from his phone. "The Meridian Tower, and I need to be there 20 minutes early." Elin adjusted his mirrors and pulled into morning traffic, noting immediately that his employer looked worse than usual. Conrad's face was pale, his jaw clenched tight, and he kept rolling his shoulders like he couldn't get comfortable. Every few minutes, he would reach into his jacket pocket and pop another antacid tablet. The weather matched Conrad's mood perfectly. Dark clouds had been gathering since dawn, and now fat raindrops began spattering the windshield. By the time they hit the freeway, the sky had opened completely, releasing torrents of rain that turned the morning commute into a crawling nightmare of brake lights and honking horns. Conrad's phone calls grew more heated as traffic slowed to a standstill. What do you mean the Asian markets are down another 3%? He snapped into his Bluetooth headset. Find me solutions, not excuses. I don't care if you have to work all night. Elon watched his employer in the rearview mirror, his medical training automatically cataloging symptoms. Shallow breathing, excessive sweating despite the air conditioning, constant fidgeting, classic signs of acute stress. But something else was building, something more concerning than quarterly pressure. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof like an urgent warning. Thunder rolled overhead as Elon navigated through the maze of stalled vehicles, his movements calm and precise while chaos surrounded them. This was the kind of steady competence that Conrad had come to expect, never realizing it came from years of making life-or-death decisions under pressure. Are you sure this is the fastest route? Conrad demanded, loosening his tie. I can't afford to be late. The board is already questioning my judgment, and walking behind schedule will just give them more ammunition. Yes, sir, Elon replied evenly. Traffic is heavy on all alternate routes due to the weather. We're making good time considering the conditions. But Elon's attention was increasingly focused on the man behind him rather than the road ahead. Conrad had been rubbing his left arm intermittently for the past 10 minutes. His breathing had become more labored. The antacid consumption was accelerating, and beads of perspiration were visible on his forehead despite the cool temperature in the car. As a doctor, Elon recognized the constellation of symptoms forming a dangerous pattern. As an employee, he was trapped by the boundaries of his role. Conrad didn't want conversation. He certainly didn't want medical advice from his driver. Elon had learned that silence was the price of steady employment. The Peterson Group is threatening to pull their funding, Conrad muttered into another call, his voice strained. $27 million because our stock price dropped 8 points. 8 points. As if the entire tech sector isn't struggling right now. Lightning illuminated the sky, followed immediately by a crack of thunder that shook the car. The storm was directly overhead now, matching the intensity of Conrad's growing distress. Elon glanced again at his employer, noting how Conrad kept pressing his hand against his chest, then shaking it off as if trying to dismiss the discomfort. The traffic began moving again, and Elon accelerated smoothly toward downtown. Only 15 minutes to the meeting, but time was becoming a luxury they might not have. Conrad's symptoms were escalating beyond stress into something far more serious, and Elon found himself caught between professional obligation and medical instinct. This is where everything changes. Make sure you're subscribed because you won't believe what happens next. Conrad ended another heated call and slumped back against the leather seat, his breathing shallow and rapid. God, I feel like there's an elephant sitting on my chest, he mumbled, more to himself than to Elon. Those words sent ice through Elon's veins. Classic presentation. Textbook symptoms. The storm outside was nothing compared to the medical emergency that was about to unfold in the back seat of this luxury sedan. Time was running out, and Dr. Elon Grant was about to emerge from 3 years of silence. The next 30 seconds would determine whether Conrad Billings lived or died. I can't, Conrad gasped, his words cutting off as his hand flew to his chest. His face contorted in agony, and he made a sound that Elon had heard too many times in emergency rooms, the desperate wheeze of someone whose heart was failing them. Conrad's body went rigid, then slumped sideways across the back seat. His phone clattered to the floor as his arms went limp, and his breathing became shallow, irregular gulps. Elon didn't hesitate. In one fluid motion, he activated the hazard lights, checked his mirrors, and pulled onto the shoulder of the freeway. Rain hammered the windshield as he threw the car into park and vaulted into the back seat, his 3 years of careful employee boundaries evaporating in an instant. Mr. Billings, can you hear me? Elon's voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded operating rooms, not the deference of the driver. He pressed 2 fingers against Conrad's neck, feeling for the carotid pulse. Weak and irregular, but present. Conrad's lips were turning blue, cyanosis indicating oxygen deprivation. This was a massive myocardial infarction, and they were miles from the nearest hospital. Elon's mind shifted into emergency protocol, muscle memory from hundreds of cardiac episodes taking control. He positioned Conrad flat across the back seat, tilted his head back to open the airway, and began his rapid assessment. Skin, cool and clammy. Pupils, responsive but dilated. Breathing, labored and insufficient. "Sir, stay with me," Elin commanded, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. "You're having a heart attack, but I'm going to help you. Try to stay calm." Through the rain-soaked windows, Elin spotted a construction worker taking shelter under an overpass. He powered down the window and shouted with the kind of urgency that cuts through any weather, "Call 911 immediately. Tell them we have a cardiac emergency on Highway 295, mile marker 47. Male, approximately 55 years old. Acute myocardial infarction in progress." The construction worker's eyes went wide, but he pulled out his phone and started dialing. Elin turned back to Conrad, whose condition was deteriorating rapidly. The billionaire's breathing was becoming more erratic, his pulse weaker. In a hospital, they would have advanced cardiac life support equipment. Here, Elin had only his knowledge, his hands, and whatever supplies he could improvise. Then he remembered the medical kit. 3 years ago, when Elin first took this job, he had stashed a basic emergency medical kit in a trunk, a habit from his doctor days, when being prepared for medical emergencies was as natural as breathing. Conrad had never known it existed. Elin sprinted to the trunk through the pouring rain, his fingers finding the familiar weight of the medical bag he'd packed and forgotten. Inside, aspirin, nitroglycerin tablets, a blood pressure cuff stethoscope, and basic cardiac medications he'd maintained just in case. Back in the car, soaked but focused, Elin immediately administered 325 milligrams of chewable aspirin, the most crucial intervention for acute myocardial infarction. "Mr. Billings, I need you to chew this completely. It's aspirin, and it's going to help your heart." Conrad's eyes flickered with confusion, but he followed the instruction with the desperation of someone who sensed he was fighting for his life. The nitroglycerin came next, dissolved under Conrad's tongue to dilate his coronary arteries and improve blood flow to the damaged heart muscle. Elin monitored Conrad's blood pressure with equipment that looked suspiciously sophisticated for a driver to possess, adjusting dosages with the precision of someone who understood exactly how these medications worked. How do you? Conrad managed to whisper between labored breaths. Later, Elin said firmly, continuing his interventions, "Right now, we focus on keeping you alive." The sound of sirens cut through the storm, growing closer with each second. Elin had positioned himself to maintain visual contact with Conrad while preparing to brief the paramedics with the kind of detailed handoff that would save precious minutes. The ambulance pulled up behind them, and 2 EMTs rushed through the rain. Elin met them at the car door, and his first words stopped him cold. 55-year-old male, acute STEMI presentation, onset approximately 8 minutes ago. I've administered 325 milligrams chewable aspirin and 0.4 milligrams sublingual nitroglycerin. Current vitals: BP 90 over 60, pulse 45 and irregular, respirations 22 and shallow. He's showing signs of cardiogenic shock and needs immediate transport to a facility with cardiac catheterization capabilities. The lead paramedic blinked hard. "Are you a doctor?" "I'm handling patient care," Elin replied without breaking stride. "He needs 4-access, high-flow oxygen, and continuous cardiac monitoring." His presentation suggests complete occlusion of the left anterior descending artery based on the symptom pattern and EKG changes I observed. The EMTs exchanged glances. They were hearing medical terminology and clinical observations that no civilian should know, delivered with the confidence of someone who had managed countless cardiac emergencies. As they worked to transfer Conrad to the stretcher, the second paramedic leaned toward his partner and whispered, "This guy's not just a driver, is he?" Elin continued providing detailed clinical information as they loaded Conrad into the ambulance. Medication allergies, observed symptom progression, response to interventions, and specific recommendations for emergency department management. His calm, authoritative presence transformed what could have been a chaotic scene into a smooth, professional handoff. If this story is giving you goosebumps, share it with someone who needs to hear about hidden heroes among us. Because what happens next will restore your faith in the incredible people walking beside us every day. Before the ambulance doors closed, Conrad grabbed Elon's wrist with surprising strength. Through the oxygen mask, his voice was barely audible. "Who are you?" Elon met his employer's eyes, no longer as driver to passenger, but as one human being who had just saved another. "Someone who couldn't let you die, Mr. Billings." As the ambulance raced toward the hospital with sirens wailing, Elon stood in the rain beside Conrad's abandoned Mercedes. His perfectly pressed driver's uniform was soaked and rumpled, his hands still steady from years of training that had never left him. For the first time in 3 years, Dr. Elon Grant had practiced medicine again, and it felt like coming home. The construction worker who had called 911 approached through the storm, shaking his head in amazement. "Man, where'd you learn to do all that? You saved that dude's life." Elon looked at his wet hands that had just remembered their true purpose. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "we carry more than people realize." The reckoning was coming. The questions would be asked. The truth would finally emerge. But Conrad Billings was alive, and that was all that mattered. 48 hours later, Conrad Billings opened his eyes in the cardiac intensive care unit of St. Mary's Medical Center. The first face he saw belonged to his head of security, Marcus Webb, a former FBI agent whose job was knowing everything about everyone in Conrad's world. "How are you feeling, sir?" Marcus asked, setting down his tablet and leaning forward in his chair. Conrad's voice came out as a rasp through his dry throat. "Like I got hit by a truck." "What happened to me?" "You had a massive heart attack, sir. Complete blockage of your left anterior descending artery. They call it the widowmaker. You would have died if your driver hadn't intervened." Conrad's memory began filtering back through the haze of medication and trauma. The storm, the chest pain. Elon's voice, suddenly authoritative and commanding, giving orders like, "Marcus, I need to know something." Where did Elon learn to do what he did? The paramedics, the doctors, everyone keeps talking about how he saved my life. But he's just a driver. Marcus pulled out his tablet, and his expression grew serious. "Sir, that's what I've been investigating for the past 2 days. I ran a complete background check on Elon Grant, something I should have done more thoroughly when he was first hired." Conrad struggled to sit up straighter, ignoring the protest from his chest incision. "What did you find?" Dr. Elon Grant graduated summa cum laude from the University of Lagos College of Medicine 15 years ago. He completed his residency in emergency medicine at Lagos University Teaching Hospital, where he spent 8 years as an attending physician. His colleagues called him one of the most skilled emergency doctors in West Africa. The words hit Conrad like another heart attack. "Doctor? He's a doctor?" "Was a doctor," Marcus corrected. When he immigrated to the United States in 2019 with his daughter Leora, he couldn't get his medical credentials recognized quickly enough. The licensing process was going to take years, and he had immediate financial obligations. So he took whatever work he could find. Conrad stared at the ceiling, processing the magnitude of what he was learning. "For 3 years, I've had a trained emergency physician driving me around the city. One of the best, according to his former colleagues I spoke with, Dr. Michael Adebayo, who worked with him in Lagos, said Elon had an almost supernatural ability to stabilize patients in critical condition. He saved hundreds of lives." The cardiac monitor beside Conrad's bed began beeping faster as his heart rate increased. 3 years of memories flooded back with new context. Elon's perfect punctuality, the discipline of someone accustomed to life-or-death schedules. His calm demeanor under pressure, learned in trauma units, not traffic jams. His precise way of speaking, the careful communication of someone trained to convey critical information clearly. The EMT said he gave him a medical handoff that was more detailed than most doctors provide. Marcus continued. "He knew your exact condition, the medications you needed, and the specific type of cardiac intervention required. They said it was like getting a report from an attending physician." Conrad closed his eyes, shame washing over him in waves. "He tried to tell me, didn't he? All those times I complained about feeling tired, stressed, having chest discomfort. He must have seen the symptoms." "Sir, there's more." Marcus showed Conrad his tablet screen, displaying a news article. The headline read, Billionaire's life saved by driver who was secretly a doctor. This story went viral 12 hours ago. Social media is calling it the most incredible example of hidden talent they've ever seen. The video of you being loaded into the ambulance, where you can hear Elin giving medical instructions, has been viewed over 2 million times. Conrad felt his world tilting on its axis. Video. Someone recorded the emergency response on their phone. You can hear Elin in the background, and it's clear he's not just a bystander. He's managing your medical care with complete authority. People are sharing it with comments about how we never really know the incredible people around us. The irony was devastating. Conrad had built his reputation on finding talent, recognizing potential, and maximizing human resources. Yet he had completely missed the extraordinary capabilities of the person he saw every single day. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, Conrad's cardiologist, knocked and entered the room. "Mr. Billings, how are you feeling this morning?" "Doctor, I need to ask you something," Conrad said urgently. "The man who helped me before the ambulance arrived, my driver, what would have happened if he hadn't intervened?" Dr. Martinez pulled up Conrad's chart on her tablet. "Based on the timeline and severity of your myocardial infarction, without immediate intervention, you would have gone into full cardiac arrest within minutes. The aspirin and nitroglycerin he administered, combined with his clinical assessment and rapid response, quite literally saved your life. Could a civilian have done what he did? Absolutely not. What your driver did required years of medical training and extensive experience with cardiac emergencies. His interventions were textbook perfect. I couldn't have done better myself if I'd been there." Conrad looked at Marcus. "Where is he now?" "He's been at the hospital every day, sir. Refused to leave until he knew you were stable. He's in the family waiting area right now. Bring him here. Now." 10 minutes later, Elin entered the ICU room, still wearing the same clothes from Monday morning, now wrinkled from days of hospital waiting. His eyes showed the exhaustion of someone who had barely slept, consumed with worry for another person's well-being. "Mr. Billings," Elin said softly, "I'm so glad you're recovering." Conrad studied the man he had employed for 3 years but never truly known. "Sit down, Dr. Grant." Elin's shoulders straightened slightly at the title, but he remained standing. "Sir, Sit down, please." Conrad's voice carried none of its usual commanding edge, only profound humility. "I have some questions, and you have every right to be comfortable while I ask them." Elin finally took the chair beside the bed. "Why didn't you tell me you were a doctor?" Elin was quiet for a long moment. "You needed a driver, sir. You were very clear about wanting someone reliable and discreet. I needed employment to support my daughter. It seemed irrelevant." "Irrelevant?" Conrad's voice rose slightly. Then he caught himself. "I'm sorry. You're right. I made it irrelevant by never asking, never caring enough to learn who you really were." "You provided steady work when I desperately needed it," Elin replied. "I'm grateful for that. How many incredible people do we pass by every day without really seeing them? Let us know in the comments about a time someone surprised you with their hidden talents, because this story is about to show you what happens when we finally open our eyes." Conrad reached for the water cup beside his bed, his hands trembling slightly. "Elin, I've spent my entire career believing that I was good at recognizing talent, at seeing potential in people. But I completely missed the fact that one of the most skilled emergency physicians in West Africa was driving my car every day. Circumstances change what we do," Elin said gently, "but they don't change who we are. Tell me about your daughter." For the first time since entering the room, Elin smiled. "Leora is 17 now. She's been accepted to MIT for biomedical engineering. Full scholarship." Conrad felt tears forming in his eyes. "I never even knew her name." The two men sat in silence, the weight of 3 years of misconnection hanging between them. Finally, Conrad spoke again. "Dr. Grant, I want to make this right. Will you let me help you get your medical license restored?" 8 months later, Dr. Elin Grant walked through the doors of Metropolitan General Hospital, wearing scrubs for the first time in 4 years. His hands, which had gripped the steering wheel for thousands of miles, now carried a stethoscope and medical chart. The transformation was complete, but the journey had been extraordinary. Conrad had kept his promise with the determination of a man who understood he owed someone his life. Within weeks of leaving the cardiac unit, he had assembled a team of immigration attorneys, medical licensing consultants, and education specialists. The bureaucratic maze that had trapped Elin for years suddenly became navigable with the right resources and connections. The process wasn't simple, even with Conrad's influence. Elin had to retake medical licensing exams, complete additional residency requirements, and undergo extensive peer reviews. But this time, he wasn't facing the challenge alone. Conrad covered all expenses, exam fees, study materials, living costs, ensuring that Elin could focus entirely on reclaiming his medical career. "I don't understand why you're doing this," Elin had said during one of their weekly progress meetings, which had replaced their former employer-employee dynamic with something that resembled friendship. "Because I spent 3 years with one of the most qualified emergency physicians in America and never bothered to learn his name," Conrad replied. "Because my ignorance almost cost me my life, and your skill saved it. Because this is what decent human beings do for each other." The media attention had been intense, but ultimately helpful. The story of the billionaire CEO saved by a secretly doctor driver had captured public imagination in ways that surprised everyone. Medical licensing boards, typically slow-moving institutions, fast-tracked Elin's applications under public pressure and genuine recognition of his exceptional circumstances. Dr. Sarah Kim, the chief of emergency medicine at Metropolitan General, had followed the story from the beginning. When Elin's licensing was restored, she personally recruited him to join her department. "We need doctors who can handle pressure," she told him during his interview. "Someone who can save a life with improvised equipment during a thunderstorm while managing a cardiac emergency? That's exactly the kind of physician we want in our ER." Elin's first day back in medicine was emotional for everyone involved. Conrad insisted on being there, despite his doctor's recommendations to limit stress during his cardiac rehabilitation. He sat in the hospital lobby, watching through the emergency department windows as Elin consulted with nurses, examined patients, and seamlessly returned to the role he was born to fill. "He looks different," Leora observed, sitting beside Conrad. At 17, she had grown into a confident young woman who inherited her father's quiet intelligence and steady presence. "He looks like himself again," Conrad replied, understanding now what he had missed for 3 years. The careful deference, the studied invisibility, those had been survival strategies, not Elin's natural state. Here in the hospital, he moved with the confidence of someone who belonged, whose knowledge was valued, whose expertise could flourish. The friendship that developed between the two families defied every social expectation. Conrad, who had never visited an employee's home, became a regular guest at Elin's dinner table. Leora, initially intimidated by the billionaire's reputation, discovered that Conrad was genuinely interested in her engineering studies and career aspirations. "Your father is remarkable," Conrad told her one evening over Elin's cooking, West African dishes that introduced Conrad to flavors he had never experienced. "I'm embarrassed it took a medical emergency for me to recognize that." "He never complained," Leora replied. "Not once in all those years. He would come home and help me with homework, and I never knew he was frustrated or sad about not being a doctor." "He sacrificed his identity for your future," Conrad said. "That's the kind of love most people never experience." The transformation wasn't limited to Elin's career. Conrad's entire approach to business relationships changed fundamentally. He implemented programs at his company to identify and develop hidden talents among employees at every level. Security guards with engineering degrees, custodial staff with MBA credentials, administrative assistants with specialized expertise. Conrad discovered an entire ecosystem of underutilized human potential within his own organization. "We had a rocket scientist emptying our trash cans," he told a business journalist who was writing about corporate culture transformation. "A former surgeon working in our mailroom, a published author answering phones in customer service. These aren't rare exceptions. This is happening everywhere, and we're all too blind to see it." The ripple effects extended beyond corporate walls. The story inspired other companies to examine their own hiring practices and employee development programs. Immigration advocacy groups used Elon's experience to highlight the challenges faced by highly qualified professionals navigating American credentialing systems. 6 months into his return to medicine, Elon received an offer that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. Johns Hopkins Hospital wanted him to head their new emergency medicine training program for international physicians, helping other immigrant doctors navigate the licensing process he had struggled through alone. "It's perfect for you," Conrad said when Elon shared the opportunity. "You understand both the medical expertise and the systemic challenges. You can prevent other doctors from spending years driving cars when they should be saving lives." Elon accepted the position, but with one condition: he would continue working emergency shifts at Metropolitan General. Patient care, he explained, was why he became a doctor in the first place. No administrative role, however prestigious, would take him away from that fundamental calling. On his last day as Conrad's driver, a ceremonial final ride to celebrate his medical career restoration, Elon pulled up to the same emergency department where he now worked. Conrad stepped out of the back seat one final time, but this time he walked around to embrace the man who had been invisible to him for 3 years. "Thank you," Conrad said, "for saving my life in more ways than one." "Thank you," Elon replied, "for giving me the chance to be myself again." The Mercedes drove away, but both men knew they were moving towards something far more meaningful than their professional relationship had ever been. Today, 3 years after that stormy Monday morning that changed everything, Dr. Elon Grant leads one of the most successful emergency medicine training programs in the country. He has helped over 200 international physicians navigate the complex path back to practicing medicine in America. His story has become a case study in business schools about the hidden human capital that exists within every organization. Conrad Billings, fully recovered from his heart attack, transformed his entire approach to leadership. His company now boasts the highest employee satisfaction rates in the tech industry, largely because he learned to see people as complete human beings rather than job functions. The driver who saved his life taught him that true success isn't about commanding respect. It's about recognizing the incredible people who are already in your presence. The friendship between their families has endured and deepened. Leora Grant graduated from MIT with highest honors and now works as a biomedical engineer developing cardiac devices, inspired partly by watching her father save Conrad's life with basic medical knowledge and improvised equipment. Conrad jokes that she's designing technology that might one day save him again. Every year on March 15th, the anniversary of Conrad's heart attack, the two families gather for dinner, not at an expensive restaurant, but around Elon's kitchen table, sharing the West African dishes that have become Conrad's favorites. They toast to second chances, to the moment when crisis revealed who they really were to each other, and to the power of seeing beyond surfaces. The story of the billionaire CEO and his secretly doctored driver has been featured in documentaries, business publications, and medical journals. But for Elon and Conrad, the most important audience has always been the people who hear their story and recognize that extraordinary individuals are everywhere, working jobs that don't reflect their true capabilities, carrying dreams that circumstances have deferred, possessing talents that society has overlooked. Elon's old stethoscope, the one he kept hidden in his bedroom drawer for 3 years, now hangs in his office at Johns Hopkins. It serves as a daily reminder that our identities aren't defined by our circumstances, and that the right moment can restore everything we thought we had lost. Conrad kept the medical bag that Elon retrieved from the trunk that stormy morning. It sits on his office desk as a reminder that the most valuable resources in any organization are often the ones we haven't bothered to discover. This story proves that heroes walk among us every single day, often invisible to those who need them most. The person serving your coffee might be a former engineer. Your taxi driver could be a displaced professor. The janitor in your office building might hold advanced degrees in fields you've never heard of. If this story touched your heart, slam that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories that reveal the extraordinary in the ordinary. Share this with someone who believes in the power of second chances and hidden potential. Tell us in the comments, what hidden talents or dreams are you carrying? What story lies beneath your current circumstances? Your experience could inspire someone else to never give up on who they really are. Because sometimes, The person who changes your life forever is the one you've been overlooking all along. Remember, everyone has a story worth knowing, and every story has the power to transform both the teller and the listener. The extraordinary is always closer than we think.